Hi again, this is Professor Innes, and for this module you have Plato and what's referred to in the text as realism. So with this you can refer to realism as also idealism. Some texts use idealism, this text uses realism, and the point we're going to understand in metaphysics is that this is to do with the argument of universals. Universals exist, but the main consideration with the philosophers is where do they exist? Where do they reside? That is the controversy. So you've done that bit of reading in the introduction to do with universals, and we understand that they're here, we use them, but the case is the main controversy is here with Plato and John Locke. You'll be reading John Locke later. Is where do they reside? Where do they exist? That is the controversy. We know they exist, but where do they exist? The implications are quite important because they'll affect the way we teach people, the way we organize government. Locke talks about concepts. He's a great fan of representative democracy. As a result, Plato rejects concepts and instead has ideals, this realism, and as a result of realism is a fan of elitism. Therefore, he does not agree with democracy. Democracy is a sham, a waste of time. So the implications are there, but we're just going to stick with the consideration of these universals and where they reside. So what we've got here is Plato putting forward an argument that these universals exist as independent realities. We human beings have nothing to do with them. It is the case that these universals existed before when human beings came into being. They're out there. They're an independent, non-human reality as far as Plato is concerned. And we've got to use our intelligence and endeavor to find them. Of course, there's a debate about how many will find these universals, and namely understand them. But with Plato, it is the case, if we are going to understand them, we've got to be enlightened. We've got to take ourselves out of our everyday world of flux, of constantly trying to understand the world and getting it wrong because we're prejudiced or we have false views. We have views based upon our own expectation, wants and desires, which constantly get in the way. And instead of allowing those impulses to get in the way, Plato says here, we must become enlightened. We must take ourselves out of these prejudices, as also argued at the beginning of the course by Bertrand Russell. We must drag ourselves out of this prison of the intellect here. So by doing this, we then have our mental abilities stimulated enough to understand the real world. You're going to watch the video and also read Plato's allegory of the cave, and it quite clearly depicts here that the unenlightened live in the cave and the enlightened live outside the cave. Doesn't state that necessarily clearly, but that's the analogy, that's the illustration put forward to compare this story to what we're like in real life. Namely, there are lots of people out there who live in a dream world, and there are hopefully some out there who are enlightened and live in this real world of seeing the world in a form which is considered to be the real world. Now, this is difficult, and it's not the case that we can become enlightened. We may think we're enlightened when we're not. The mental state of many people is such that they have their prejudices. They may even have a brain which is incapable of being enlightened, except that narcissistic people are so wrapped up in themselves that they cannot imagine something other than that what they're thinking, and therefore they can imagine the real world here of forms. So we're thinking to ourselves here, how many people are going to manage this? For Plato, it's just a few, maybe 3% of the population. The rest are cave dwellers. They're going to remain in that cave. Those of us who can drag ourselves out of the cave are doomed to be the enlightened. So with that, we've got this understanding that we're looking at anything. We can bring forward examples now and say here, how are we going to recognize what is essential in a given thing to say it belongs to a group without being prejudiced in saying here that this thing belongs to this group. Now, again, I'm picking on Boise State football team once again, and it's the case here, I might say, I'm not saying it, but I might say that Boise State football team is often considered as a great football team, but once I look at the statistics or whatever they are, look at how many times they actually win and who they win against, because that comes in handy as well here. I heard a few weeks ago they won 50-0 or something, and I think to myself, that's not a really good match between two teams, and it doesn't display their ability. So could that be considered as them being a great football team? They could do that just as well with the local kindergarten football team as well. So I think to myself here, right, there's something wrong here. Now, if I'm a football fan of Boise State, I may allow my prejudice to get in the way of this analysis. Now, if I'm enlightened, I have to set aside my prejudice and therefore my liking of this football team and analyze them in abstraction, therefore with the bare facts before me. Now, if the bare facts display to me that Boise State football team is not in fact a good football team, as an enlightened person, I have to accept that. And now on, I will say I will still support this team, but not as a great football team, but as a football team I like. That's a big difference from, say, supporting a team because they're brilliant. So one's become enlightened. And again, this is not the information you're going to take to the next game and try and enlighten others and say, here, come off it, they're not that great, but, we still like them. I don't think they'll be quite happy to hear that one. But nonetheless, as an enlightened person, that's what one does. So therefore, in order to be a great football team, therefore reside in the form of great football teams, one has to possess the essence of what it is to be a football team. I don't know what that is because I don't know too much about football or anything, but it is the case, therefore, Boise State football team would have to possess this, which makes them a good football team, the essence. That is what Plato demanded us to do, to find out. So that would make us enlightened. So that's us being enlightened, finding these essences which make this form what it is, and therefore it's the real form. It's the form which is unadulterated. It's not tainted by prejudice or anything. It is what is seen as possessing that essentialism. Right. So hopefully this makes sense. We put forward some examples, and your journal entry this week is going to ask you to put forward 3 examples. Right, so I've got it written down here. Name 3 things Plato would think essential to a universal to make it a form. So, name 3 things that Plato would think essential to a universal. So, I've got an example here. It's a simple one. Well, the simple ones are often the best ones. For a French fry to be a French fry, it's got to be crispy. If it's not crispy, it's not a French fry. Now, that would be an essential of a French fry, the crispiness. So, therefore, I've got one example, a more complex one to do with politics. For democracy to work, it must represent people. That's an essential of democracy. Right? If it doesn't represent people, then it's not a democracy. So, therefore, for a democracy to be democracy, it's got to be representative. So there are 2 examples. So look out for 3 examples, whether simple or not. Write 150 words for the whole thing. Give good full explanation, please. I need to have it explained to me why this is a reasonable argument. So 3 examples of those things. I can use the word things here. It's I'm making it vague and ambiguous for you to go out of the way and think about these here. So name 3 things Plato would think essential for something to be a universal. Okay, so that's your journal entry. So hopefully that makes sense, and you're going to put this forward after I reply to your initial entry. So don't, whatever you do, write anything, write this particular entry as your initial entry. You're going to write something about Plato's forms first, just your general understanding. Then I'll come along and say, go to your helpful hints video and find this journal assignment request. So this will be your second entry for this week. Okay, so with that in mind, keep thinking about Plato as being that which is arguing for universals as being independent realities. That's the essential bit of this argument. They're independent realities. And what you've got to understand as far as these universals is that they are independent realities. Your feelings, your desires have got nothing to do with them, and it might even be painful when you watch the video. Again, referring back to the video, the light of the sun, therefore reality, might be very painful. Learning that Boise State football team is a mediocre football team might be painful for some people, but it is the truth. It is reality. Likewise with any knowledge, if it takes away with that prejudicial view, that comfortable view you once had hitherto, it takes it away and makes you understand the real world, could result in you suffering a great deal of pain. So keep that in mind. This enlightened project is not an easy project. That's probably why Plato said very few people are going to be enlightened. If anybody could be enlightened, that is. You could put forward the argument nobody's enlightened. We're all prejudiced, stuck in our own little fantasy worlds, and we don't see the world for what it is, which is not a joyful world according to Plato. Right, so that's Plato, and again, this is the helpful hints video, just giving some direction here as far as how to understand Plato. So make sure that you do all these assignments, and a notice here for some journal entries which have not had the reply put forward to them. They're still there to do. I haven't graded them yet, but I'm going to have to grade them eventually. It's not everybody, but a few people have just not replied. And we're talking about going back a few weeks here. So look through your work. If there's no 0 or 10 or 50 or whatever, it means the work is still yet to be done. So please do the work, and don't be too hung up about putting forward late work. I know you're not supposed to, and administrators, bureaucrats don't like that happening, and so forth and so on. But we're philosophers here, and we're not administrators. So even if it's late, do put it forward, please. Okay, so with that, I'm going to say goodbye and good luck with the section on Plato and the looking at universals and forms. See you later online. Bye.